honored to be a part of this conference and a part of this panel. I'm going to share my slides. I am professor of anthropology and chair of the Department of Sociology, Anthropology, and Social Work at Central Michigan University. And I've been studying in Senegal for almost 2 decades now, and I continue to learn a lot by doing that. Today I'm going to talk about 2 rural daras, or religious communities, that carry out Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba's teachings, and that's why I'm so honored to be a part of this particular conference today. The 2 daras are affiliated with the Murid Sufi order and its Baifal suborder, and led by Serigne Babacar Mbow. The daras build on Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba's teachings to address regional needs, just as Bamba did in an earlier era. The challenges that Ndem and Mbaki Kajor daras face are steep. While local, they are tied to, of course, global issues. The 2007 to 2011 global economic recession deepened the region's unemployment problems, rising food prices, and lack of funding from international financial partners. Global climate change add to the effects of over a century of repeated drought. Historically, similar economic and environmental conditions were backdrops for the daras that Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba created. The 1873 global economic recession, severe drought in the early 20th century, and French colonial occupation all pointed to needs that Bamba addressed. His models of religious education were inclusive, directed at both the learned elite and the illiterate. His daras were learning communities during a chaotic time. Bamba also taught the importance of working for one's community as a way to work for God and God's creation. One of his disciples, Sheikh Ibrahim, created a model for praying through labor for one's community. Fall became the model for the Baifal suborder of the Muridiya. Both Murid and Baifal principles specifically address caring for the environment and dedicating labor to God. These ideas are, more broadly, also a part of social justice teachings in Islam. The 2 daras I discussed today are designed to put all of these teachings into concrete practice. They are centers for working for God through prayerful labor. Their goal is to revitalize communities facing the region's long-term economic and environmental challenges. In the 1980s, Serigne Babacar Mbow and his wife, Sokhna Issa Cissé, started the Ndem Dara. The village of Ndem is the ancestral home of Serigne Babacar's grandfather and great-grandfather. The Dara, adjacent to the village of Ndem, today includes a residential area, a health clinic, a walled organic garden, millet and peanut fields, and an artisanal center. The Dara is committed to environmental revitalization as a part of spiritual education. Both Daras have substantial garden areas that allow space for seedling nurseries, animal pens, tree farms, and a vegetable and an experimental plot. Fencing keeps out animals that would destroy the plants. Dara residents' objectives of practicing organic agriculture and circulating that knowledge as widely as possible have required them to work closely with regional extension agents. Along with the drought, the primary struggle for agriculture in the Sahel is its poor soil, with little organic matter to retain water and nourish plant life. The Daras described here use several strategies to create an environment for growth. One strategy is agroforestry, planting trees along with gardens, and this is common throughout the Sahel. Trees shade young plants from the Sahel's direct sunlight, and tree roots can stabilize the sandy soil from blowing away. Ndem's residents started planting trees in the Dara in the 1980s, and they started agroforestry in the early 2000s. Another strategy is to improve the soil. As you can see in the larger picture here, the Sahel soil is sandy. It is poor in nitrogen, which is necessary for plant growth, and constant heat further depletes this nutrient. The region's staple grain, millet, depletes nitrogen in the soil. Legumes, including groundnuts, however, add nitrogen. 2 other common ways to add nitrogen to the soil are composting and planting nitrogen-fixing trees, especially 2 types of acacia that are indigenous to the Sahel. Amending the poor soil, though, is a constant struggle for farmers. You can see in the smaller picture the intensive work needed to protect a single tree to ensure its growth. Transforming the environment means working from the ground up, quite literally. They do this while building wide participation in organic gardening for the surrounding area. Indem's gardening manager coordinate hands-on training for the surrounding villages and hosting visiting school groups. As Ngom, manager of the Indem Garden, explained, quote, "The objective for the garden is a little big. It's to educate and to work." In 2014, the lessons learned in the Indem Dara were soon to be applied to a new community. The Murid Khalif General entrusted Serene Babakar to develop an historically significant and sacred site near the town of Mbake Kajor. Sheikh Amadou Bamba started his teaching at this site. It is also the specific place where Sheikh Ibra Fall, the model for the Bai Fall, first submitted as a disciple to Bamba's spiritual guidance. Serene Babakar and residents of Ndem designed the Dara to address the region's need for professional, agricultural, and spiritual education. The community has created a residential area with a communal kitchen, classes for French literacy, textile dyeing and tailoring, and 2 large fenced-in organic gardens. While these activities are already in place, construction sites for a prayer hall and residence for visiting sheikhs and Quranic students are ongoing. The funding for these projects comes from donations across the global Murid community, and the Dara has already received grants from European foundations for specific projects such as the gardens. While Dara residents manage and carry out most of the work, groups of Murid, especially BIPOC groups, visit to participate in the work. Both a historical site and the opportunity to work for the Murid community at large are really strong draws. As one of the garden managers in Mbake Kajor noted, the Dara may be new, but it already has, quote, "the connective tissue of community," end quote. A resident of Ndem, Falu Fall, also explained the connection between labor, work for God, and community. Quote, "Bamba said, when you work for me, Bamba, you work for the population. You are born again when you work. Everything you do for God. If you are a part of Muridism, you can start with Mbake Kajor. It's the door," end quote. At both Daras, workers are motivated by belief that laboring for God and their community is a form of prayer, the belief that working to end poverty is working for God's creation, and the widespread belief that the religiously centered plan for the Daras will serve the communities around them. Similar to Ndem, Mbake Kajor's Dara garden managers have the goal of spreading knowledge about reforestation and organic gardening. They give a treat to each of the women who are involved in educational programs at the Dara. These include, again, sewing, literacy, and French classes. They instruct the women on how to care for their trees, especially after the rainy season when water is scarce and the trees are still young. In this way, the Dara can help people in the 7 surrounding villages start their own greening efforts with the knowledge and resources that they need. To be a long-term and widespread solution, which are 2 standards for effective environmental change, these methods must function without electricity. While reforestation methods are based in scientific research, being low-tech as well is necessary in a region with limited and unpredictable electricity sources. In both Daras, a number of initiatives all come from the same motivations: to address spiritual, economic, and environmental needs. Local approaches to small-scale transformations rely on these integrated, community-led motivations. The initiatives are slow because of their circumstances: lack of rainfall, lack of potable water, rising temperatures, and unpredictable electricity. Most of the work is laborious, by hand. The slowness has the benefit, however, of including more people. They are making rural communities livable again with long-term goals and perspectives. Quick fixes are not only not possible, they would not be sustainable in the long term. A recent documentary on Mbake Kajor points out this work is, quote, "the very definition of sustainable development." The spiritually meaningful work of the Daras discussed here, plus the religious structures that support their work, make their environmental labor transformative for life-sustaining agriculture. As Sopna Isa explained to me, the responsibility has been given to Serene Babakar to make this place alive again. You really see how this place is historically important to the world as the birthplace of Muridism. In order to make this place alive, there's an element of education. There's a marriage of spiritual education and practical trades. For education, the context is Murid, but it is bigger than that. It is important for people to go back to the earth and to have a new relationship with agriculture. Taking the philosophy of total ecosystem change, rather than just focusing on one field or one crop or one village to educate, the two Daras have already transformed their environments from a sandy expanse to the start of a greener landscape. Following Bamba's teachings, the Ndem and Mbake Kajor Daras have created a place where service to God addresses rural economic needs, spiritual needs, and the degraded environment. So I'd like to thank residents of Ndem and Mbake Kajor and to the Murid Islamic community in America. And also to close, I referenced a documentary that Roxanne Mbanga recently completed, and I first watched this weekend. It's very new. When it's ready to share, I will share it with you, and you can see for yourself the extraordinary work that is happening here. Jerry Jeff.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cochrane. The format that we are using makes my life very easy as a moderator of this panel, because we have very qualified commentators to go over the presentation